So first of all, Baruch Hashem, I think Lefi Erech, last Sugya was very matzliach. A few Bachrim came to me over the last few days. One Bachar tells me that Mamish now, as he went through the last Sikha, now he understood the Mahalach. He got the Mahalach. And that's a big Yisoid over here, and I think it's a new kav of figuring out, of learning many Sikhs in one Inyan, and trying to figure out the Rebbe's Mahalach here. So that was a shtickle. There was a shir psiche, but the whole sugya was a shtickle sugya psiche. And from that sugya, we're going into this sugya. The MS is that it's a seamless flow, because if you look at the beginning of the first sikha here, Veschanon, you see that a mamish starts with that Indian, with the nekuda of emunah and yediyah. Where's the lashon there? Right in the beginning of the sikha. Yeah, that tzvei psukim, the second line, was in yonim is the emunah and yediyah ki avayu alikim. And then the Vaiter goes on in that, the Nekuda of the Emunah and the Yediyah. And the MS is that there are parallels between this Sugya and the previous Sugya. I'm saying that lechatchila because it was nicht kommen später mit Tainus. The Nekuda I'm bring out is that, as you realize, you go through the Sikhs, especially the Sugyas and Chassidus, Sof and Gans Chassidus, there's a lot of similar terminology, and Nekudis and Inyanim. And on the one hand, there's a certain gishmak, a certain familiarity with it. So it's sort of, you don't feel like you're starting in Gansen and Nayazam. Zacheni, you could get a bit bored, or feel that b'seidach Hashem gezen, and then Michlal, once you see the Rebbe being mechaber in Yonim, so you already start running to Atzmos and Chibur Kol in Yonim, and it's not true. But at the same time, the pratim and the chidushim and yeder zach and yeder sicha and every sugya are gevaldik. Zeh zer gishmak. Another hakdama when you get to this sugya. And already a few Chevre brought it up. Achdus Hashem. So talking about Achdus Hashem. Achdus Hashem is not another Sugya in Likud Sichos. Achdus Hashem is Gans Chassidus, yeah. And it's taka true. And mitzad echad, and that's part of the gishmak of the Sugya. Mefratz is Chedesh Kislev, the Chassidish Chedesh, a Goludik Chedesh. But at the same time, the Sugya is not Gans Achdus Hashem. If you want Gans Achdos Hashem, you could start with Sefer Erchim, end of Chelik Ches, Gans Chelik Tes, Void Yadam Netuya, the following Krachim. Right, so Achdos Hashem obviously is a massive sugya, including in the Rebbe's Torah as well. It was called Achdos Hashem because also that's the name of this sugya, but in Achdos Hashem Gufet, it's Lefi Erech in a certain kav, meaning there's a certain kesser between all these sikhs here, even though the oyasius of the sikhs and the terms in the sikhs might be very different, and we'll go through some of them tonight. But the nekuda, and this is the nekuda I'm trying to bring out, what's the kav, what's the shnit that you'll see throughout all these sikhs, even though the Rebbe uses many different terms. The third hakdama before we start is that many of these sikhs, bisman, when they came out, when these sikhs were printed, when the sikhs were mugeh, they were ma'pecha, meaning it's not. Versteht sich, man sagt nicht Shmuel zu no, Shmuel zu einer no. I think that everyone said that you can't say Shmuel zu no, but Shmuel zu einer no. But sagen Shmuel zu no without the tzad hasheni, right? Meaning that there's these sikhs, right? You just look at there's obviously the sikhs from the Kut sikhs, and then there's a sikh of Kuntas Yonos Ter Chassidus, Hadin al Rambam Tov Shalamed Hey, Ve'oid, and these sikhs bisman when they came out, they were mamish ma'pecha. Each one was in Avon in Yisoidistik in Yonim Chassidus and in Achdus Hashem, as we'll discuss weiter. Fine. So the sugya of Achdus Hashem, Kemeduber, is mamish the Yisoidistik sugya l'cheira in Chassidus. You look over here, the beginning of Shar Yuchad Ve'emunah, that's brought here in the beginning, right? Shar Yuchad Ve'emunah starts Lahavin Mat Mizir Mashakasa B'Zayir Deshma Yisrael Chulu V'Yichud Ve'Yilov Baruch Shem Kveim Malchusi Le'Elam Vod Yichud Tata. And of them is Shar Yuchad Ve'emunah, and we know Shar Yuchad Ve'emunah, even though it was printed as the second chelik in Tanya, but there was a svara to print it as the first chelik, and not only was a svara, Alter Rebbe left different inyonim in a few places in Tanya where you see that actually this comes like Yisbayer, certain things are what was first, what was second. He left certain inyon to show that even after the maskana, Be'etzem Shar Yuchad Ve'emunah kumt freer, because ultimately that's the Yisoid, the Yichud, Achdus Hashem. So Kleina Maisa. So Maisa brought in the Beis Rebbe that the Alter Rebbe was on the way to the Magid. This was the last time he went to the Magid. It was Tov Kuf Lamed, maybe when another time afterwards. But he was on the way to the Magid, And on the way, he stopped off by Pinchas Karatzer. Pinchas Karatzer was another one of the greatest Talmidim of Baal Shem Tov. As he stops off by Pinchas Karatzer, so Zamin, and then Pinchas Karatzer hears that Alter Rebbe is on the way to the Magid. So Pinchas Karatzer tells the Alter Rebbe, "Bleib bei mir, stay here, and I'll teach you." And he gives him a whole list of things that he'll teach him. He tells him like this: "I'll teach you Sichas Ha'oifis, the language of the birds; Sichas Adkolim, the language of the trees; Maise Merkava, Maise Bereshis, und wie zu gehen in die Echolis." The Alter Rebbe said, the Alter Rebbe hears, the Alter Rebbe said, was is negea zu wissen, what we have to know is, the einzige Sache is, Yachid, Echad, and Void. Und das lernt man beim Magid. It's a shkoyach for the offer, it's a very enticing offer, but this was negea. First of all, just understand how history could have been, how different things could have been, and what would be our sprach, yeah? But the Nekuda is, he went to the Magid, You're getting excited, yeah? You're saying we still have, even with Chabad, we also have people speaking to... The Alter Rebbe comes to the Magid, and as he comes to the Magid says, Reb Pinchas wanted to teach you Sichas Ha'oifis v'chulu. Therefore the Magid says, I'm going to teach you Yichud Lo and Yichud Tato. It's interesting that the Alter Rebbe said it as, you're teaching me this, but the only thing that's negeya is Yachid Echad Void. The Magid, the Lashon born Beis Rebbe is, they're far. Whereas because he wanted to teach you that, therefore I'm going to teach you Yichud Lo, Yichud Tato. What do you see? You see that ultimately Yichud Lo, Yichud Tato, Yachid, Echad, Void, right? The terms are not as much negeya as the Nekud that we're bringing out over here. That it's Achdus Hashem. That's what it's all about. Now, Chassidus comes, and what is Chassidus Mechadash and Achdus Hashem? So this very Geshmak Loshin, you saw that Tzemach Tzedek puts down, it's Bechlal and Derchen Tzveisecha, the Tzemach Tzedek is Mevar, the mitzvahs, according to Chassidus. But when you get to Achdus Hashem, the Tzemach Tzedek brings the Indian very, very clear, and he says like this, that there's three stages in the Havan of Achdus Hashem. There's Alpi Nigle, Alpi Pnimiyas HaTeira, Alpi Zoyar, and Alpi Chassidus. Alpi Nigle Teira Pat. What's Achdus Hashem? Shema Yisrael Avayid Elkein Avayid Echad. It's one of the Shesh Mitzvahs Tmidiyas to believe that the Eibishter is Echad. What does it mean Echad with Pashtus? Yeah, you look in Pashtus, you look in Rambam, Pashtus before you get to the Hadranim. Yeah. So Pashtus looking in Halacha. The mitzvah is Asdod nor ein Eibishter. There's one Shalit. There's one Balabos. The Eibishter is the Intzika Balabos. B'Shemayim Mimau Lords Mitachas. And there's no other boss. Comes Pnimis HaTeira, comes Zoyer, and Zoyer comes and tells us that what's the word of Achdus Hashem, not only the Ibisher is the only shalit in the ganze Welt, but Meret, Pnimis HaTeira retach in Oiris, in Spheris, in Alikus Gufe. And the word in Alikus Gufe is, that's not Tzvei Shemis, there's Shem Avaya and Shem Alikim, and Pnimis HaTeira tells us, Avaya Alikim Kulachad. That don't think that these are two different koiches. It's kulachad. In other words, there's no harkov in Alikus Gufe, it's kulachad. And then the way that Tzemach Tzedek says, the lashon is al pi oimek yisayda Baal Shem Tov. Then there's Achdus Hashem al pi oimek yisayda Baal Shem Tov. What's that? Pi oimek yisayda Baal Shem Tov is not only Avay Velikim kulachad, and that the Eibushter is the only shalit, that the Eibushter is the einzike mitzias. He's the only balabas. Versteht sich? He's the only mitzias that exists. Nothing exists. Einen mulvadi is kipshuti. Einen mulvadi, there is nothing else other than the Eibishter, other than Elikus. Fine, so this is the Yisoid of Achdus Hashem according to Chassidus. Now, after versteht sich, fragt sich the Shaila, the simple Shaila, how can you say the Eibishter is the only Metzias? It's doch jeder Welt. We're alive, I'm alive, you're alive, there's a table, there's a room, there's a sky outside, there's a sun, there are things. So with Pashtus, you'll come and say, fine. If Chassidus tells us that the Eibishter is the Ein Tzke Metzias, we see many other things and we experience many other things in our lifetime. So with Pashtus, what do you say? It's Al Tzadimyan. It's not real. The Eibishter is the only Metzias, everything else is fake. Here Chassidus comes and says, right, and the Rebbe always brings, what's the mucker for this tzad? The Rebbe always brings the Rebbe Marash. It's one of when the Rebbe would quote the Rebbe Marash's Torah, this is one of the main quotes in Mikamecha Chavtes, that no, we know that the Welt is a Metzias. How do we know the Welt is a Metzias? The first mucker is, there's the Pasuk. Bereshis Aleph Aleph, yeah? It's not only a mucker negate to Eretz Yisrael, it's also negate to Chalas Da Welt, that there's a Welt Bechlal, that there's a Metzias. Bereshis bara l'kim es hashmayim es haaretz. If Torah tells us the Eibusher created the world, there's a world. When Torah is emes. Then there's another makir from Achizas Einayim and Kislev. I'm going to get into those prat. Fine. And here, Be'etzem, start the Sugya of Achdus Hashem in Chassidus. On the one hand, Nishtakin Welt. Achdus Hashem means the Eibusher is the only Metzias. Right? Another word, another term for Achdus Hashem is Bittul Lo'elamis. In other words, wie versteht Chassidus Achdus Havaya? As Nishtakin Welt. Nishtakin Metzias. So Bittul Lo'elamis is the other side of the coin of Achdus Havaya. So on the one hand, Bittul Lo'elamis. Nishtakin Welt. On the other hand, Siyeda Welt. Bereshis bara l'kim es hashmayim es haaretz. Fine. So how do we understand this? And so here, Shayuch Emunah and Achdus Hashem and the regular Mamorim, right? You have the Mamorim Ha'umnom, v'chulu, of the Sugya of Achdus Hashem. What's the Nekudah? There's many Biyurim in Achdus Hashem, right? You look in the Erechim, you'll see the amount of Biyurim in Achdus Havaya is mamish bligvul. So many different Biyurim Achdus Hashem. What's the Nekudah? The Nekudah is that Takis Sidah Welt, but the Welt, as we know it, and the Welt is a Metzias, but this Welt is bottled to the Eibishter. This Metzias of Welt is bottled to the Eibishter. How is the world bottled and why is it bottled? Here are many, many different Biyurim. The first, you say the stick of beer that's brought in Shayuchot Ve'emunah, and this is the famous beer. What's the beer? The beer is that the Eibishter is Mehave, the Welt, and Mechaya the Welt, B'chol Rega V'Rega. Hisavos B'chol Rega. And what's the var? This is Betzim in Perak Aleph, Perak Beis Shayuchot Ve'emunah. He says that the Welt, Betzim shouldn't exist. The world is created Yesh Me'ayin. Something that is not supposed to exist, something that's Hipech Etz Teva, in order for it to be, needs a schadshus tmidis, needs to always be brought into existence. Right, and therefore he brings the mashal here in Tanya, he brings the mashal of Kriyas Yamsuf. Water, Betzim, is supposed to flow. It's not supposed to stand up. In order for it to stand, it constantly needs the Ruach Kodim to hold it up. The mashal that's brought in Chassidus a lot more, and the Derech Chal is attributed to Ha'umnom and other Mamarim, is the mashal of Zrika 7, right? You throw up a stone is supposed to be falling down, like everything that falls down. So how does it stay up? Because there's a koyach, a zrika that holds it up. The moment the koyach ceases to exist or be with the Evan, the koyach is over, so the Evan falls down. Fine. So v'meile, the Eibush there has to be mahava the oilam mechol rega, because the Welt should be garnished, shouldn't exist. And because the Eibush there is mahava mechaya the Welt b'chol rega, therefore, we say the Welt is bottle. Meaning the Welt is not really in existence. It's mitzido, it's not here. It only exists because the Eibush there wills it into existence. The Eibush there makes it exist. So its existence is attributed to the koyach. So there existed. The Eibush there existed. The world only exists because he brings it into existence. So the lashon sometimes brought in Chassidus is, does the Welt exist? It exists, but it's not an independent existence. So the lashon will be, it's not a metzias amitis. Right? Different nuscha is brought in different mamarim. You can't really say it exists because it's completely dependent. And that's the first basic beer, which even Klali and Chassidus will be called Yichud Ilah, right? And then we go to Yichud Tata, and then we get Hecher to Yichud Ilah. Now, many of the sikhs here will discuss this nekuda in Achdus Hashem of the Yishabus O'ilam coming mitzad the Dvar Hashem shebesoichoi that gives it its kiyum and gives it its chayis, and therefore it exists. And here the Rebbe will have kol minei diyukim. Now, so on the one hand, you can learn this kunteris, and this also explains the mahalach of this kunteris. On the one hand, you can learn the mahalach of the kunteris. It's a kovetz of the Rebbe's biyurim on shari yichud ve'emunah the ershte parakim. Right. So first we have here Perak Aleph and Beis. On Perak Aleph and Beis, there are a few sichos from the Kutei Sichos, Kurnis Yonesh Derech Chassidus, Hadin al Rambam, B'chulu. Then, towards the end, then there's a small inyan that are in sichos that are not full sichos or even full sifim. So you have here on page 49, you have here a very geschmacke ha'aris and b'shalach elikvav. They're very sadistic in how the Rebbe learns the bittul elam. Then on page 58, you have Prakim Gimel through Hey, and then B'hemshech Lazeh, there's a long sicha from Shabbos Parshas Mishpatim Tafshin Chav Zayin, that explains the mahalach of those sichos. Fine. So first you have many sichos that are miyosed on Perek Aleph and Beis, and then there are sichos that there's the long sicha that's miyosed on Perakim Gimel through Hey, and it's pasha biyurim on Tanya. Right? It's the Chedesh Kislev, and there's a siyum of Tanya Bal, the Meipim Tanya from the Snai, the biyurim on Tanya. But then it's a lot more. Because first of all, there are a lot more biyurim on Tanya. Obviously, these are the Sedistic biyurim, but there's other biyurim as well. But when you go through these sichos, you'll also see a mahalach. And what's the mahalach? And Kimeduber, in every sicha, the terms, number one, the terms change, meaning the kalim, the psukim we're speaking about, the oisius we're using will be different, but also the biyurim change. But the yisoid that goes through them is l'chera zeir klar. What's the yisoid? So first of all over here, so the first sicha this is one of the classic sichas on Sha'ar Yichud Emunah, V'eschanon chelek chaf tes, right, a famous sicha, it's a full sicha, that explains the first perek in Sha'ar Yichud Emunah. What's the nekudah, the yisoid that the Rebbe puts over here? So the yisoid the Rebbe speaks about barichas over here is that you look in Perek Aleph, Sha'ar Yichud Ve'emunah, there's long arichas of L'shoinus, and you see very often he says like this, he brings the nekudah of mehavis and mechayis. Right? So a lot of times there's Lashon mehave and Lashon chayis. And the dvar of Choy Mekayomim, that the oisius that come into this world are the chayis, that they're in the nivroim, and there's a lashon of chayis. Another lashon that's brought come upon him is melubashes, that the oisius are melubish in the world, and these are the oisius that Rebbe uses here of islabshus and chayis. And what's the nekudah? The nekudah is as a Pashtos. When you hear the vart of the Baal Shem Tov, what's the vart of the Baal Shem Tov? The vart is that the pasuk says lo'elam avayad dvarcha nitzu b'shamayim. So the Baal Shem Tov is mevayer, right? The Rebbe reads many times. Already the Medrash Tilim says it. When you need the Baal Shem Tov, Baal Shem Tov is pirish miloshin. So he was a Pharisee in the Indian, gekocht in the Indian. There's also certain diyukim that on the Baal Shem Tov's vart that's not in the Medrash Tilim. What does the Baal Shem Tov say? The Baal Shem Tov is mevayer that everything that was created with a Dvar Hashem. So L'mashal, the Shemayim was created with Yehirakia. So the oisius of Yehirakia gefinnen sich in the Welt, constantly to give it, to allow it to exist. But the way the Baal Shem Tov says, it's not only that the oisius are here to be mechayed. He says that these oisius are melubish in the Welt. What's the word of the slapshus? The slapshus nekuda is that pashas you could say the world exists, the world has its own identity. It's so mitzias. How does this mitzias exist? There's this koyach that keeps it in place, that keeps it going. It's like you put a motor, right? There's an engine within this world, and this engine gives us chayas, right? So you turn on the light, and now there's light over here. Now when you're turning on, you're turning on the switch. The switch is not light. It's not oil. The switch is something that creates that generates the energy, the electricity, and the electricity brings light into existence. So you have ein mitzias that allows another mitzias to exist. But when we say mislabshes and mislabish and mechayet, what we're saying is a sachtifer. That not only the Eivishner's koyach is allows the nivraim to exist, but rather it's mislabish, it becomes the identity of the nivra. Meaning that if you look at the nivra, vos is the nivra, vos is the chayis from the nivra. What's the pnimius of the nivra? The pnimius of the nivra is its chayis alikis. That's its identity. That's what it is. It's not something foreign to it that's giving it allowing it to exist. It becomes the foundation of its existence, its whole toichen of its mitzias. Now, in the sichas over here, the Rebbe is not mevayer this Indian that much. It's mevor, I would say, I think we should have put it in here. We just say there's some geshmaka oisias in the sicha of the Harbichu Koisai Tafshin Nun Aleph. In the middle of the sicha there, it speaks there about Masar Mamoris and Maimer Echad. So in the Mugdik Sicha, there's some Geshmaka Oisius there where the Rebbe explains how the Asar Mamoris becomes the identity and the Toichin Pnimi of the Nivra. And just in one line, so L'mashal, right? So what do we have? So we have a Metzias. So what's our Metzias? Our Metzias, let's say, are as human beings. And we have different we have emotions, we have Chacham Minadas, Chabad, Chagas, Nehim, right? That's what makes a human being. So you look at the human being and you say, 1 second, who are you? On my thoughts, on my feelings, that's my identity, right? But then the shaila is, what are these thoughts? What are these ideas? This that you have Chabad, this that you have Chagas, Nehim, was is das? So what's Chesed? Chesed is be'etzem Chesed of Atzilus. It's Chesed of the Eibishter. It's Chesed of the Eibishter that's tzamtzim and is slavish, and now becomes your Chesed, right? And your Chachmah. So basically now what happens is that through this Islam shus, our Mitzias is basically a representation and a manifestation of the Eibishter's Keiches. So we're not just created by the Eibishter Yesh Me'ai and the Eibishter is Zerachik from us. Rather, who are we? We are an expression of the Eibishter himself. Fine. What is this Neget Achdus Hashem? What this Neget Achdus Hashem is that this is a Sach Tifer Havana in our Shaykhs to the Eibishter. Because if you say that the Eibishter, that our dependence on the Eibishter is that without the Eibishter we can't exist, fine. So if you're talking about mitzad only dependency, then richtig. Without him, we're not here. But the flip side is, but with him, once he does create us, once he creates us, and he allows us to exist, so my mitzvah is a mitzvah b'fnei. You can technically divide, right? You can make a split between my mitzvahs and the Eibishter's mitzvahs. I need him, but I need him, right? There's a me, there's a velt that is totally in him. But once you say that the Eibishter is nislabish in the nivra, then there is the whole toichin of the nivra, the whole mitzvahs of the nivra is the Eibishter. So it's not only a dependency, rather it's who we are, it's our identity. It's not only I'm dependent on him, the velt is him, the velt is alikus. Fine, that's the Eresh Sikh. And this is the first side of the coin. And this brings out, you could say, the gadlus of Yichud Tata. Because the Parshas Yichud Tata is Kishma Kenu. It's Tata, and Yichud Ilah is Ilah. It's lower, right? If it's lower, there's the Chisar. What's the Chisar? Because usually the Chisar of Yichud Tata is, Sof, the Eibishter brings this world into existence. So so the Welt is not, you can't say the Welt is a ganzen bottle because the Eibishter allows the world to exist. Right? Versus Yichud Ilah, where the world is in ganzen bottle. We'll get to that later. So here we come and say that Taka Yichud Tata has that in Kudah where the Eibishter gives Epson and Sinas Makim La'ilam. But Mitzat Sheni, the bittul here is very, very stark. Why? Because what happens in this bittul is that because the Dvar Hashem is nislabish in the Nivra and becomes the Metzias of the Nivra, there's no prat of the Nivra that's not him, that's not the Eibishter. Who am I? An expression of Elikus. But, so that's the first sikh. Comes the second sikh. The second sikh is Vayeshev, Yutas Kislev, Chelek, Chafei. So it's very geschmack sikh. If you have time, you can learn the whole sikh Chafei. But here's the Yena Shol Torah of the sikh. And here in this Sikha, so you look over here in Sif Yud. So Sif Yud, the beginning of the Sif, the first few K'toim of the Sif, Be'etzem the Rebbe does in a few K'toim, the Rebbe gives Chazara, a Sikum of the first Sikha. The Rebbe says that tzad. What's the tzad? The tzad is that the Dvar Hashem is the Chayus of the Nivra. Right? I'm completely connected and identify with Alikus. But then the Rebbe says, the bottom of page 16 of the Kovetz, the right side, the Fiza, as their bittul from their nivro is nitkein bittul b'shleimosei. Why? For if he bald as their chayus was sich mislabish in nivroim is a chayus mit sumtzum mugboloit in nivro, is doch neis in mokem limitzias hayesh, v'meila zeich their bittul mitzadem chayus nitkein bittul b'shleimosei. Yes, it has that maila that the world is completely connected with the Eibishter. But at the end of the day, we're always speaking about a velt and elikus and a dargan elikus that is mislabish in the velt. On the one hand, it's islabshus creates a complete identification, which on the one hand is tachlis habittul. But we're talking about a bittul, something that exists. It's elikus that's mislabish in it. The fact that he's mislabish in it, what's islabshus? Islabshus means I relate. There's a connection. He comes to the world on the world's terms and connects with the world. So the world isn't in ganzen bottom mitzad this nekude that the gila likus, it's a dargan likus that gives an isnus makom nivra. And here starts this mahalach that we'll see in the next few sichos, which is that taka on the one hand mered vegen dvar Hashem Gila Likus that's in Slavish in the Nivroim. Aber zusammen mit dem, we also have the quality of Elikus Shalamayla Mebriya. And Be'etzem here comes, and again, the exact oisius will depend on which siche, but here comes, like you see very often in the Rebbe's Torah, the Nekudas HaChibur. What's the Chibur? The Chibur of Yichud Tata and Yichud Ilah. Or in some siches, it's the Chibur of Achdus Hashem Milmata L'mayla and Milmayla L'mata. Now what's the Nekuda? The Nekuda is, so the oisius in this siche, by Yeshiv Yutas Kislev, is the Rebbe connects the two big chidushim. At the beginning of Sif Tes, the Rebbe says, Al the Rebbe is mevar and mechadish and shayuchad ve'emunah, two close stick nekudas. One nekuda is the dvar avaya that's b'chol nivra and that the world is haveh b'chol rega berega. And the second nekuda that's later shayuchad ve'emunah in Perek Zayin, tzimtzum lav kipshutei. Right, which in some of the sikhs the Rebbe gives more oisis when he gets it then. And the Rebbe connects tzimtzum lav kipshutei with the word of haveh b'chol rega. So the nekuda of tzimtzum lav kipshutei is because what's the tzimtzum? The tzimtzum is before the tzimtzum is Eir Soif. After the tzimtzum is the Oyer Mugbal, which through tzimtzumim becomes the Oyer that we spoke about before, the Oyer, the Dvar Hashem that's in Slavish and the Nivroim. But if I say tzimtzum lav kipshutei, so kumtei is that even after the tzimtzum, the Oyer Abligvol is Dalamata. So in the Nivroim that are receiving their chayis, l'chayra from an Oyer Mugbal, and the oil that gives an nesinas mokim for oilemis. At the same time, mitzad emes, tzimtzum lav kipshutei. So in that mokim of the dvar Hashem that's in Slavish and the Nivroim that l'chayra gives an nesinas mokim loilemis. Be'etzem we have here oir ein soif that is shoyl loilemis in ganzen. Now obviously, how does that work together? So that's in the toichin of the sicha. Just say the sicha. It's here. It's very very bekitzer. In other sichas, right there over here, a little more oisius. But the Rebbe, the sichas mutas kisla tashim mem aleph. But Be'etzem, the Sugya the Rebbe spoke about then, Be'etzem started a few months earlier, and some of those nekudis are brought here in Ha'ara 84, and other Ha'aras here in the sicha. It's a Sugya the Rebbe Be'etzem started speaking about in the summer of Tafshin Mem, from Parshas Dvarim, and then it was. Ekev, or it started a bit Matis Masi, and then Dvarim, Ekev, Re'ei. There were a few, Kama Sikhs, the Rebbe spoke about this Barichis, and then the Rebbe said a Loshin, it was Parshas Dvarim, the Rebbe said, das the Sugis was Medarf Kochen in Chsitz. The Rebbe said, Bechlal, there's a lot of Sugis in Chsitz. So the Rebbe said like this, the Rebbe said, there's Sugis, Noheira Tichla, Noheira Uchma, there's Kshmaka Sugis. But beikir is a kochen in the ikir. I don't know exact lashon. The main sugyas of Chassidus. And the Rebbe said like this: Tzimtzum lav kipshutei, hashkocha pratis, and ishabos b'chol rega. In these sichas, you'll meet these terms many times throughout these sichas. Right, and this Betzim, the Rebbe spoke about it for a few months, and this Betzim became this sicha, this Mokedik sicha from Yutas Kislev Mem Aleph was miyusad on those sichas. Fine, that's the sicha of Yeshiv Yutas Kislev. Then comes the sicha of Kuntas and Yonash Teres Achsidis from Yutas Kislev Tavshel Chavav. When the Rebbe said it was mamish a massive shturim. Then the Rebbe was magiyit, also a whole parsha. The Rebbe asked to be magiyit as when they wanted to print Sefer Erech in the first krach, so they asked the Rebbe if the Rebbe could write a mavoi. So the Rebbe said, if you bring in this sicha from Yudas Kislev, it was a year or two later, from Yudas Kislev, was from Geretveg in the Nikud of Yechide and the different Biur Mechsidis, then I'll use it as a mavoi. They brought it into the Rebbe, and it sat on the Rebbe's desk for a few years, and the whole Sefer Erech, the first Sefer Erech, was delayed for a few years. It wasn't able to be printed, because the Rebbe wrote to Shazar that was pushing the Rebbe that it should be printed, because he arranged there should be money from the German Claims Conference to pay for the Chabad Encyclopedia. So the Rebbe said that the Sefer is Pasha ready, it's all ready to go, it's just waiting for my Haggadah, the last 8 pages of the Sefer, which is Kudosh Yonash Teres Achsidus. This letter was written Tavshel Chavches. There's 3 years later, Tavshel Lamed Aleph, the Rebbe was looking for it, the Rebbe couldn't find it, so if you had to write it again, the Rebbe was Magiyah the Sefer. L'poyel, so the Sikh is a very Yisayistic Sikh, a lot of Inyanim Yisaydim in Chassidus, and it's not everyone, many of you learned the Sikh or heard of the Sikh and the Kudus of the Sikh. Here, the Kudus Negil in the Neinu is that the Rebbe shows how Chassidus is the Yechida, and Yechida is the fifth chelik in Torah. Which, right, there's the four Ilamis, and there's the four Chalak, and there's Pshat Remes, there's Soid, and then there's Chassidus. And the Yechida, the Chassidus, on the one hand, it's Hecher von alle Ifanim in Torah, and it gives Chayis, and it adds beer in all the Ifanim. Then, as a dogma, the Rebbe takes Moida'ani, the Rebbe explains Moida'ani according to the four Pshat Remes, there's Soid, and then the beer of Chassidus. Here, the Nekudas in the Gilin Yanenu is how the Rebbe shows what Chassidus does, the beer Chassidus gives to the Chelak of Soid, the beer of Soid of Moida'ani. That the beer of Soid of Moida'ani is we're talking about Malchus and Yisoid, Spheres of Malchus and Spheres of Yisoid. And Chassidus gives us this beer, and the Teichen of beer is this Nekuda. The Malchus is a Dargan Elikos that has a Shaykhus to Ilmas, has Mahava Ilmas. Mitzat Sheni, it connects to Yisoid, and Yisoid is connected to the previous Spheres, Biz to the Oiris, Hecher than Etzils, and Koidim Atzimtzum. Uvemela that even in the oir that's mehava the oilam, that's it's connected to atzmus sein soif. So you have the oilam, how it's the oir that's connected to oilamis, and within that space we also have the gilui von hecher. We'll just say benegea to here, or certain sifim that were brought here that was negea directly to this nekuda. If you have time and you want to go through the understand the beer better, learn the sifim in middle as well. Meaning the sifim here are Tes Yud Yud Aleph, and then Tes Vav, Yud Beis Yud Gimel Yud Aleph, explain the other Ifanim of Moida'ani, but if you learn the whole Arichas, it's a lot more Geshmak this in you. In the next Sikha, which is the Hadrin Lamed Hey, which was the first Hadrin of Rambam, that it was Magia, it's the long Hadrin on Rambam. So here the Hadrin is Miyusid on Be'ikr on the first two halachas of Rambam. And the Nekuda is, here the Rebbe speaks about two dargas in Elikos. The Rebbe uses Lashon Rambam, Matzui and Eine Matzui. And here as well, so Matzui and Eine Matzui, even Klali, and the Rebbe says this a few times in the Sikha, in the Aris, because in the opinion the Rebbe tries to stay away from Oisis of Chassidus. It's a Rambam Sikha. But in the Aris, some Aris, that the Rebbe added later, the Rebbe connects it to different dargas in Chassidus. So the Rebbe connects it to Memale and Soiviv, to Elikos, V'acharat Simtzum, and Koidemat Simtzum. And here as well, the Kama Mekoimis, the Rebbe's Mangish, this Nekuda, you can see it on page 30, and a similar Oisius on page 35. The Rebbe here brings the mashal that you have a Chachem that Be'etzem is much smarter than the Katan that he's speaking to. And then he has to be mitzamtzim himself to relate to the Katan. But then the Rebbe says that even then, when the Chacham relates to the Katan, he's mitzamtzim and speaks to the Katan. Right? You always have the Chacham speak to the Katan, or the Av that's misachik in Bnei Katan. And that's called the mashal of Tzimtzum, that he goes down and relates to the Katan on the Katan's level, and Take relates. Right, Take leaves his regular space, and he doesn't think in his regular, the way he regularly thinks when he's discussing something with a Katan or playing with a Katan. But here there's not just the flip side. Aber chas v'sham to mean that at this moment the Tate becomes a tippish, right? Or that the Chacham forgets all his wisdom. He stays with the ganze bli gvul. So that's the nekuda. Even when he's matzui, he still has eine matzui. And this is poyo, as Rebbe explains in the Sikh, this is poyo on the oilamis. Mitzad matzui, the Welt has a mitzias. Mitzad eine matzui, the mitzias is not a mitzias amitis, there's the bittul oilamis. Behemshech lezeh, there's the next Sikha, which is be'etzem very similar, with slight differences from the Sikha of Hadran al Rambam. You see in a few places the Rebbe is mitzay into the Sikha of Hadran. So Eschan and Chelik Chav Daled, very gishmak Sikha. Here, what in the previous Sikha, the Rebbe connects with the Rambam and attributes to the Rambam's two halachas, the two dargas of Matzui and Eine Matzui. Here, the Rebbe connects it to Rambam and Rashi. That the Rambam and that the first halachas in Rambam versus the Rashi on Ataris Ladas Kavai Lakim and Ed Movadai. So the Rebbe connects it. The Rebbe connects these two dargas of Matzui and Eine Matzui. Here it's a bit of different lashonis. And the Rebbe here connects it to Yachid and Echad. That's the Sikh over here. Then there's the small K'toim over here, the very Geshmaki in Yonim, the Ramoisiv Beer in Shayuchad Ve'emunah. That's the first Chelek. Then, just for a minute, the last Chelek, so here is the Sikha of Mishpatim Tashon Chav Zayin. The Olam knows what the Sikha is. Seen the Sikha? Ever looked at the Sikha? So this is a Sikha that Be'etzem was said Bekesher to learning the Rambam on the radio. Learning the Tanya on the radio. Tafshin Chazayin, they started, I think it was Tafshin Chaf, it started. And at different times when so Bechlal, we know that Shiur Sefer Tanya was Muge by the Rebbe. What's that Muge, right? Every Shir before he said it over, Matzi Shabbos would be the Shir, the Rebbe would listen to the Shir. He would say the Shir on the radio. Before the Shir, he would write it up, give it into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was Magiyah. There's Meirdik Biyurim there, and Hagoyes. So here, they mamish struggled. A few shilas on what's going on in Perek Dalet and Hey. But a big shaila here is, you just look over here on page 61 and 62, so you see in 61, the end of Perek Dalet, so like 7-8 lines before the end of the Perek, V'hinei b'chinas hatzimtzum starts with a brackets. So, but the bracket doesn't finish. So where's the end of that bracket, of the end of Perek Dalet, the Sharichot Ve'emunah? It's probably not there. So shaila, what's going on there? So that was the shaila they gave into the Rebbe, amongst other shilas. The Rebbe first wrote it was a shtickle beer, and it was a back and forth. Then he said he'll be mevayer on Shabbos, and the Rebbe gerät a lange beer. But what's very interesting is was are coming from their beer. So the Rebbe says there at the end of the whole beer, the Rebbe says, you look at the last page here of the Kovetz, be'im biur hanal bichlalusei nachein. See that obviously the Rebbe wrote this in because the beer is in Yiddish. This is all Lashon Kodesh. If bichlalos this beer is correct, I'm not going to get into the details, but if bichlalos this beer is correct, you could explain a suffix. There's a shlifshoit, a suffix, stadi l'cheira, which where's the siyum of the bracket that starts at the end of Perek Dalet. So the Rebbe said, according to what we explained over here, you could say like this, because the whole beer it explains that from the beginning of the bracket of Dalet till the end of Hey is one arichis. The Rebbe said, Mekenzagin, that be'etzem, the end of Perek Hey, we see finishes with a bracket. It's a one-line bracket. So Yeshloimer, that the last bracket was a double bracket. It finished 2 Chatzoi Ribuas. And the world-famous Bacher HaZetzer from Claim to Fame, from Nashi Sichis and many other places, right? So the Bacher HaZetzer saw the extra bracket and he said, what's the zoing here? So he fixed it. Right? Now what did the Rebbe do here? The Rebbe here gives a Meirdik beer that explains Mamish Meirdik in Yanim in Tanya. Mendel Wächter famously he speaks about this often. Basically, this is the Sikha that turned him into a chassid. He would come to Rabbi Yale. It was every Thursday night. They would learn with him. In the years he was a scarf to Lubavitch, so the rules were you're only allowed to learn until the Rebbe Rashab, from the Kehillah where he comes from. And they were learning Tanya. So they learned Biyurim on Tanya, and they would learn, then the Sefer was Biyurim from Korf, the Kuti Biyurim from Korf. And they learned Perek Dalet, and hey, they got stuck here, and what's Tutzichta? They said, okay, let me learn the beer. So they learned different Biyurim there, Biyurim of Chassidim. Here they're learning a beer. And there it doesn't really bring Ma'ar Mekoymis. They're learning the beer and it's mamish a Meirdik beer. And ultimately that's going to be, where's this beer from? But after he finished the beer, he realized, okay, this is not another beer of Greinim, it's not another beer of another Chassid, this is Epis Anders. And finally, he realized that it's a beer for Rebbe. And this completely, he shut down for a few weeks, he didn't come, he had to revisit everything, but ultimately this is what made it a Chassid. Right, it's a but really it's a Sikha, very, very sadistic Sikha, and this, in a way, is the flip side of this whole conversation. Right, so first we start off saying that, right, there's the Varavaitz and Slavish B'chol Nivra. But then there's a Chisar, because there's a Tzimtzum, and it's not, and it doesn't, and maybe mitzad this Darga, you can't say that the Oilumis are in Gansen bottle. Only mitzad Erin Soy, but here there's a Tzimtzum. So then we come and say Tzimtzum Lav Kipshutei. Then we come and say that the Any Motzui exists within the Motzui. That the Yechidi, the next Sikha, right? Each Sikha has its different Lashonis, that the higher Darga exists within the lower Darga. But here in this Sikha, we come and say, one second, if the Welt is in Gansen, but there's no Metzias, so what's with Teirah Mitzvahs? And what's our Shlichus here? And what's with the Metzias So'ilam? And this Sikha brings out the other side. The Welt is a Metzias. And that's the whole Vart and Sharichah Demunah. After the previous Prokim, you'll come to Maskan Nishtakim Welt. So here we madgish the other side. The side, as Yedo at Simtzum, in the Sikh, you have a few times the Lashon, the Tzimtzum is a Mitzias. Now, versteht sich, at the same time, we have to understand how the world, how the Tzimtzum is a Mitzias, the Kalim are Mitzias, so Melo, the Welt is a Mitzias, Torah Mitzvahs is real, we're actually doing something, we're dealing with a real world, and we're bringing Kedusha to a world that previously wasn't Kaddish, right? There's real change happening. And at the same time, the Tzimtzum Lav Kipshuti, right? That's where it all comes together. But this Sikha sort of brings out that side, the side of the Metzias of the Tzimtzum. It's a very long Sikha, and it goes into the, and the Pasha takes you through the Arichis of Shar Yichud Ve'emunah, of those Prakim. If you have the time to go through the Sikha and learn how it goes in the Prakim, it's Gevaldik. If not, I would say you could start from, in this Sikha, you could start from page 65 on the bottom paragraph, the next few pages, and you'll get the general Mahalach. But for Shteitzich, even if you have time, do before that and afterwards, Mamish Zeir Reich, how the Rebbe learns Kam V'Kam Inyonim in Shar Yichud Ve'emunah. Al Kol Panim, yeah, so this is Innis, Doch Chedesh Kislev, und Zayin Batzlacha Rabbe, and Shekoyach to Mendel for preparing the Kovetz, and with these Masros, and Chassidus Chedesh from Geula, Chaim.